With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Chaf Dalid. We left off on Daf Chaf Dalid, Amid Aleph, 4 lines from the top of the Amid. We're going to learn regarding the mentioning of Chanukah in Birchas Hamazon. We're going to learn about mentioning Rosh Chodesh, Ya'aleh V'yavai in Birchas Hamazon. We're going to question whether we say Al Hanisim during Musaf on Chanukah. Don't forget, Chanukah is not a Yom Tov that has Musaf because of it being Chanukah, but you have Shabbos Chanukah, you have Rosh Chodesh Chanukah. For Shabbos you say Musaf, for Rosh Chodesh you say Musaf. Do we then add the Al Hanisim, and do we mention Yom Tov in the abridged repetition of the Friday night? Shabbos is Shmoina Esrei. Right, the Baal Tefillah says, Veistach Magin Avos, Koine Shemaim Va'aretz, Magin Avos. So do we add there also a mention of Yom Tov, or do we only conclude with Mekadesh HaShabbos? And that's going to be linked in part to the question whether Tfilas Arvis is Choiva, or as we have in Brachas Chav Zayin, whether Tfilas Arvis is Rishus, and much, much more. Chavra, let us start Chav Daled Amid Aleph. Nochamal 4 lines from the top of the Amid by the 2 dots. Iboy Elohu. Baruch Atah Adino Eloheinu Malachayim Shar Kol Nimudvarim. Says the Gemara, Iboy Elohu Mahu Lahaskir Shel Chanukah B'Birchas Hamazon. In other words, when we learned on Daf Chaf Aleph, Amid Beis, my Chanukah the Tana Rabbanan, and the Braisa concluded that we make a mention of Chanukah both by saying Hallel and in Hoida'ah. Hoida'ah means in the Shmoina Esrei. Question is, do we also mention it in Birchas Hamazon? And as Rashi writes in the top, Bitfila, the top Rashi in the Amid, Pshitolan, Shaharei la Hallel ula Hoida'ah, Nikva'u kida amrin an la'el. But what about Birchas Hamazon? What's the 2 sides of the question? On one hand, Kivin the Midrabanan, who, since the whole Yom Tov of Chanukah is midrabanan, so Yeloi matkirinon. What the Gemara is trying to say in between the lines is when it comes to the mentioning of biblical holidays like Yom Tov, there is no doubt that we mention them in Birchas Hamazon, in Ya'aleh V'yavai. But here it's a Yom Tov only midrabanan. Oy Dilma, the other hand, will be because of the concept of Pirsum and Nisa, it's only midrabanan, but still, matkirin, and we should make mention. So Amar Rava, Amar Rav Schreira, Amar Rav Huna, that Einoi Maskir, that you are not obligated to mention what we call the Al Hanisim in Noy Delocha. But if you do make mention of it, then maskir b'choida, then you have to make mention of Al Hanisim in the Noid Elocha, in the second of the 4 right now brachas in Birchas Hamazon. In other words, and not in, let's say, not in Binyan Yerushalayim, because it's not a supplication. It's Hallel and Hoida'ah. So it fits, verstehst, in the bracha that begins with the words Noid Elocha. Says the Gemara, Rafuna Bar Yehuda Ikla Lebei Rava. He once visited the house of Rava. And Savar La'at Kurei B'Boinei Yerushalayim. He thought he's going to make mention of Al Hanisim as we do by Ya'aleh V'yavai, as we make mention of Yom Tovim in the bracha of Boinei Yerushalayim. So Amar Lahu Rav Sheshes, no, that it has to be mentioned Kitfilah, just like in Tfilah it's mentioned B'Hoida'ah. Right? We don't mention Al Hanisim like we mention Ya'aleh V'yavai. Ya'aleh V'yavai is like I mentioned in Ritzei, but Al Hanisim is mentioned in Moedem Anachnu Lach, because that's connected to a thanksgiving. It's not a supplication. It's a thank you. So Af Birchas Hamazon, if you make mention, you must make mention b'hoida. Furthermore, on the same topic, so they further asked, Ma'u lahaskir Rosh Chodesh b'Birchas Hamazon. Now, as we mentioned before, biblical Yom Tovim for sure are mentioned in Birchas Hamazon. Rosh Chodesh is a biblical Yom Tov. The Torah speaks about Rosh Chodesh. So im tim soleimer b'Chanukah derabbanon leitzarech. Exactly. So therefore, Rosh Chodesh, which is a doiraisa, so you should be obligated to make mention of it in the Birchas Hamazon, or it's taken midoiraisa, but it's not on the same level of a Yom Tov. How is it not on the same level? There's no prohibition of doing work. So therefore, maybe loy maskedin, and here we have a machlokes. So Rav says you are obligated to make mention of it. Rab Chanina Amar eina masked. Says the Gemara, Amar Rab Zreika, Nekoy de Rav miyaska. You have to follow the sheet of Rav that says yes, masked. Why? Because the Koy Rabbi Ishya Kavosei. Because Rabbi Ishya, as always, he was the famous compiler of Braisas. He found the Braisa. Perhaps when they were arguing, they didn't yet know of the Braisa. In the Braisa, we see like Rav, the Tani Rabbi Ishya. And this was his Braisa. Yomim Sheyesh Bahen Karban Musaf. Any day that comes along with a Karban Musaf, for example, Rosh Chodesh, Choyloi Shel Moed. Then says the Braisa, by all of the tefillas, Arvis, Shachris, Umincha, when you are Mispalal Shmoina Esrei, you should va'omer me'ein ha'mo'ura ba'avoid. Avoid does it say? You should make mention, clear, of Rosh Chodesh. You should make mention of the Yom Tov during Chol HaMoed in the Ritzei Tefillah of Shmoina Esrei. Ve'im lo yamar, and furthermore, it's not only something that has to be done lechatchila, but it's ma'akev. Ve'im lo yamar machzir noisi, with all of the pratim that we're not going to get into right now. Do you have to go back to the beginning? Do you go back to Ritzei? And by the way, there's one nuance over here, that the only time we don't repeat the Shemona Esrei is Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh. It's good to remember that. Ma'ariv Chol HaMoed, if a person forgets Yalav Yovid, they're mechuyev to repeat the Shemona Esrei again.
If there's one day?
It's nothing to do with 1 day or 2 days. It has to do with the fact that they were not Mekadosh the Chodesh at night. The Gemara speaks about it. We have to say Yalav Yovei by Ma'ariv, but if we forgot, the Machzir Noisei doesn't go to Ma'ariv Rosh Chodesh. Furthermore, says the Braisa, Ve'ein Bahen Kedusha Ala Kois. Right? Kiddush is only Shabbos and Yom Tov. Kiddush is not a Chol HaMoed, Kiddush is not a Rosh Chodesh. V'yesh bohen haskara bebirchas hamazon. That's the topic that we're talking about. And when you bench, yes, you have to make mention of the fact that it is Rosh Chodesh. Again, this is like Rav. Weiter says the Braisa, Yomim she'ein behem karban musaf. Days that don't have an it or karban musaf. For example, Sheni v'chamishi. Right? Mondays and Thursdays. In the parentheses, there's another Sheni. Why would you even think Mondays and Thursdays? The Gemara is going to ask that in a moment. We're going to make a emendation. First, it says Mondays and Thursdays. The Girsa now is and on fast days, and on Ma'amodais. Chavre Masechta Tainus. We're going to learn, just like the Kohanim and the Levium were divided into Mishmarais, the Yisraelim. Really, when I bring a carbon, it's definitely ideal for me to be there. It's not ma'akev in many cases. I can send it through a shliach, but it's important for me to be there. Since Karbanis Tzibur are being brought on behalf of all the Yidden, so theoretically, all the Yidden have to be there. It's not shaykh for all the Jews to be the whole time in the Beis HaMikdash, so we designated representatives. And these were special people. We learned a lot of pratim and tainas. Some of them actually went to the Beis HaMikdash. Many of them were representatives, but they stayed in their cities. If you remember, and they made big gatherings, and they had special tefillos, and not only that, there's many pratim. During when the people that were the representatives of everyone else, the ones who stayed home, would gather and dav and make special tefillos in the city, in the streets, and they would fast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. There we spoke about why you don't fast on Sunday. The Gemara in Tainus, you don't fast on Friday. So no, it's during these fast days. Now before the Braisa goes on, the Gemara interrupts. And the Gemara Taka doesn't understand. Why are you Bachlal mentioning Mondays and Thursdays? You can mention Stama Yom Choil. Sunday, Monday, what's Sheni v'Chamishi, Ma'av Detayu? Why are they being sort of say singled out? So the Gemara says, no, you're reading it wrong. He means the Sheni and the Chamishi and the Sheni of Tiny Yois. When there is a drought. So there's a whole series of fast days that are imposed on the community, again, as we will learn in Masechtas Tainis. And when they are imposed, it's imposed not day after day after day after day, but it's called Bahab, Monday, Thursday, Monday. By the way, there were many series of them. Sometimes there is a series of 7. So it's Monday, Thursday, Monday, until you get to 7. Or my Madois, like we just mentioned, my Madois was again Monday through Thursday, without a break. They fasted during the daytime of the day. They broke the fast always at night. The point is, the Braisa is now speaking about special fast days. There, since there is no Musaf, says the Braisa, Arvis, Shachris, Umincha, Mispalel, Shmoyne Esrei, and, excuse me, and mention is made concerning the fast in the bracha of Shemei Tefillah, right? By a fast day, what do we say until today? We say Aneinu. Where do we put Aneinu? In Shemei Tefillah. However, unlike Yalav Yavai that we just mentioned, even post facto is essential. You have to machzir and you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. The Aneinu is not so. If we're going to go with the parentheses and we don't make Kiddush, and the Ein Bahen Haskara Bebirchas Hamazon. When there's an Aneinu, that there's no mention regarding the affliction during Birchas Hamazon, people are going to ask, what are you talking about? It's a fast day. No. These are not fast days like Yom Kippur. These are not fast days like Tisha B'Av. These are fast days that one lichatchila, we eat night preceding the fast day, but it's a day of fast. So you would think, make mention, we don't. Bottom line is that we see amongst the many dinim in this Braisa, like Rav, that maskir, which is exactly the way we do it. Furthermore, they asked in the yeshiva, this is such a practical topic. It's a machaya. Mahu lahaskir shel Chanukah b'musafim. You see, Chanukah, people should remember, it's a longer davening. We say Hallel, we have Kriyas HaTorah. There was no musaf that comes with Chanukah. Musaf will be said on Chanukah when it's Shabbos Chanukah. Chanukah always has in it Rosh Chodesh. Now, interestingly, Cheshvan and Kislev are the 2 months that even though we have a fixed calendar, it's not fixed how many days Rosh Chodesh. Sometimes there's going to be a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, sometimes there's going to be a 1-day Rosh Chodesh, but whenever there's Rosh Chodesh, you have Musaf. So the question is, do we say Al Hanisim in the Musaf that happens to be on Chanukah? Why yeah, why not? This is very, very, very easy to get the two sides of this debate. On one hand, you can argue, Kivin the Leis Bei Musaf B'didei, Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf. There isn't a carbon Musaf on Chanukah. Of course not. Of course not, because you can't bring Kachim La'azara. Any rabbinic holiday cannot come with a obligated carbon. A person can bring any day they want. If it's not a Yom Tov, they can bring an Oila, you can bring a Shlamim. So, but there is no Musaf. Like on Purim, there is no Musaf. So loimat kirinon, you're davening Musaf. Who cares? You're not davening Musaf because it's Chanukah. You're davening Musaf because it's Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh doesn't have an Al Hanisim. You're davening Musaf because it's Shabbos. Shabbos, we don't say Al Hanisim. Just because it happens to be on Chanukah, it's not a tefillah connected to Chanukah. Oy Dilma, no. That Yoim Hu Shechayev Ba'arba Tefillos. Like the way you look at it, that this now that there is Musaf, it's Chanukah. You're mechuyev on that day, Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos, of Chanukah to daven for tefillos. So therefore, every tefillah should have in it the Al Hanisim. Does it remain 2 distinct entities, or does it become one entity? There's so many different ways of chopping the two-sided inquiry. And here again, we have an argument, but here many more people are involved. Listen to this. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, the Amri Tarvayu, that it's taka not mentioned. On the other hand, Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yechanan, the Amri Tarvayu, that yes, maskid, it is mentioned. By the way, the halacha is like this latter opinion. Like I said, we mention Al Hanisim in Musaf. Now, Amar Abaye Rabbi Yosef, that Hod Rav Huna, the Rav Yehuda, the first 2 opinions, Einoi Maskir. I'm going to add something even better to give them more koyach. The Ravu. This is consistent with the opinion of Rav, which bears a lot of weight. As does, what does Rav Yechanan hold? Now, by the way, Rav Yechanan is on the other side. And we also have this Klali Hashash Shlema, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan. Don't forget, Rabbi Yechanan was the head of the Amoraim in the Holy Land. Rav was the head of Bavel. So we take a paskan like Rabbi Yechanan, but this is a big statement. No, it didn't begin with Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, which were both Talmidei de Rav. It's consistent with Rav himself. Now we have to find, where do we find that Rav opined regarding this? We're not going to chop it so quick. So the Amar of Gidl Amar Rav, Rosh Chodesh Chaliyas b'Shabbos. People are all familiar with this. Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos. Hamaftir Navi b'Shabbos, whoever gets maftir, we make brachas after the reading of the Haftarah. Einoi tzorech lahaskir shel Rosh Chodesh. The final, right, post Haftarah bracha, how does it conclude? You remember? You know, on Yom Tov, what do we say? We say Mekadosh Yisrael v'Azmanim at the end of saying the Haftarah. On Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, we don't do so. We only end Mekadosh Shabbos. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh doesn't demand saying Haftarah. We don't say Haftarah because of Rosh Chodesh. It's a very good comparison, at least at first, and we're going to refute it. Shilmole Shabbos, if not for the fact that it's Shabbos, ein Navi b'Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, it's only logical that even though you are saying it on Rosh Chodesh, you don't need to mention Rosh Chodesh. So the same thing is over here. Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf. You're saying Musaf because it's Shabbos. You're saying Musaf because of Rosh Chodesh. Nothing to do with Chanukah. So therefore, you shouldn't say Al Nisim. And L'choira, that's the Rav that will be the backup to Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda. Counters the Gemara. Well, I like what Rav is saying, but you cannot compare these two cases. Mi Dami, over there, Hasam, Navi b'Rosh Chodesh, never. We never read Haftarah on Rosh Chodesh. There is never a Rosh Chodesh that demands the Haftarah, ever. Klal, like a klal. But over here, Chanukah demands Al Nisim. I know that Chanukah doesn't demand Musaf, but Chanukah demands Al Nisim. That's a big difference. Hachi Isay, and you say during Ma'ariv, and you say during Shachris, and you're saying during Mincha. Again, Masha'en Kein Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh. Nowhere in Rosh Chodesh are you going to mention any Haftarah. However, you're right that they sided with Rav, but it's another Rav. Okay, so that's another Shlomo is just bringing up. We don't say Yalav Yavai because the whole Musaf is Rosh Chodesh. I want to make it. No, it's like we don't say Yalav Yavai when you're davening. Okay, but that's different because Yalav Yavai is a haskara of Yom Tov. The ganze davening is speaking with more pratim about it. Elo lo hadamia. You're right, it is Rav, but to what? Another statement. The Omar Rav Achadvoi. In the name of Rav Masna, in the name of Rav, Yom Tov Shechaliyas b'Shabbos. Now, guys, buckle your seatbelts. You're going to read something that you probably never heard prior to last cycle when you learned Shabbos Chav Daled. Do you know, according to Rashi, that there used to be a minhag every Shabbos afternoon to read 10 psukim from Navi? So he says that Yom Tov Shechaliyas b'Shabbos, and therefore you're reading Maftir. In other words, aside of the Kriyas HaTorah that we do, that's way older. That's we know Ezra. One of the takanas of Ezra is to read from the Torah. Aside of that, there was a minhag to read from the Maftir, and there Rav says HaMaftir b'Navi b'Mincha b'Shabbos ein tzarich lahaskir shel Yom Tov. He concludes only with Mekadosh Shabbos. Now, guys, I want to say like this: Shabbos, when we daven, the normal, the Kriyas HaTorah that's in between Shachris and Musaf on Shabbos Yom Tov, we conclude not only with Shabbos, Mekadosh Shabbos Yisrael v'Azmanim. But still, since Mincha, there is never a reading of Navi on Yom Tov. Even though it's Yom Tov, but it's only because of Shabbos that's mamish like Chanukah. It means in Shachris, we're going to say Al Nisim. In Shachris, you're going to make mention of Yom Tov in the bracha of the Haftarah. But since Shabbos has an afternoon reading, Yom Tov never has an afternoon reading, She'ilmalei Shabbos ein Navi b'Mincha b'Yom Tov. Now let's read inside Rashi 8 lines from the bottom, because people read this, they don't know. Right, we are Baruch Hashem. We are observant Yidden. Who has such a thing? So says Rashi that I found b'tshuvas hagoinim shehoyu regilam likros b'navi b'shabbosos b'mincha asara psukim and ubiyemei parsiim. Here, during the times of the Persians, gazru gezeira shalei lasois, and after the Persians stopped that minhag, in other words, it was a minhag hoyu regilim. So they never picked it up again. The kivan shenestalko nestalko. Azoy zogt Rashi. Tosfos has a big problem with that, and Tosfos writes the second to last line. Uvetiras Rabbeinu Tam. It's not like Rashi. When Rashi says that the psukim was regilam likrois b'navi, there is a big difference between reading verses from the Nevi'im. Our Shabbos day Yom Tov Day, Haftorah is Dafke B'Navi. I don't know if you noticed that. We don't read Ksuvim. There, in Mincha, they Dafke read Ksuvim. Okay. And we'll leave it at that. So there's a machlokes what the minig used to be, and this is a great proof. Now, verstehst the Haftorah that's read Shabbos, that's Yom Tov, B'Mincha is perfectly analogous, if that's the word, with our topic. Turning to Daf Chav Daled, Amud Beis. So now we have Rav, but we have much more than Rav. So now we have Rav Huna, Hals Kap Chevra, we have Rav Yehuda. You can argue we have Rav Gidel. It's not exactly the same, but we have now Rav Achadvoi. So you would argue, so many opinions on that side. Einoi Maskir says the Gemara, but we don't follow all of these teachings. We do say Musaf. We do say Alanisim and Musaf. Why? Ela kiha the Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Azvaz Yoy Makipurim Shechalias b'Shabbos. Guys, how many tefillas do we daven on Shabbos? Shabbos never comes with a ne'ilah. Never. There's 4 tefillas because you have Musaf. Shabbos, Yom Kippur, another example. You daven ne'ilah only because it's Yom Kippur. So I want to know, do you make a mention of Shabbos in ne'ilah? Same type of question. In the morning you make mention of Shabbos. Like in the Shachris, you're going to say Al Anisim. This is the one tefillah that is not connected at all to Shabbos. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Tzarich lahaskir shel Shabbos. And the Nusach Rashi brings 3 lines from the top is that we say Vatitan lanu es yoyim hamonoyach. Azan Nusach. That means Shabbos. And the es yom kippurim hazeh. And furthermore, when you finish the bracha, you're not choisim only regarding Yom Kippur, but choisim mekadesh haShabbos v'yom kippurim. And like Rashi, v'afal pisha ain't tefillin ilu b'Shabbos. This is another great analogy to our topic. And why do we do so? These are the words of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Because Yom Hu shenas chai ba'arba tefillos. By the way, guys, Yom Kippur, we daven 5 tefillas. Yom means the daytime. During the daytime, there are 4 tefillas. So since it becomes a Yom Kippur dika, Shabbos dika, it's together. So you have to mention both. So therefore, you're right. Chanukah doesn't have Musaf, but when you're davening Musaf on Chanukah, because it's Shabbos, because it's Rosh Chodesh, yes, you have to make mention of the Al Hanisim. All based because of the weight that we give to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Now, the final will be amazing. Azoi, you're siding with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. I have a contradiction now. Now I have a problem. Why? Because Amrat, you just went ahead and you have all these opinions, Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda and Rav Gidel and Rav Achadvoi. We're siding with the other, Rav Nachman, Rav Yechanan, not only because of Rabbi Yechanan, because of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, I have a problem. We also know, and no one debates this din, that we paskin like Rava. What Rava? Which Rava? Says the Gemara. The Amar Rava, Yom Tov Shchalias b'Shabbos. What do we do unique, my friends, Friday night? What's unique Friday night is that there is a abridged repetition of the Shemona Esrei. It's not the full-fledged Chazaras Hashatz, but the bracha that the Baal Tefillah makes, Magen Avos, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu, Kaddish, Teskabel Tzoloison, it's an abbreviated, it's called an abridged repetition. Chaver Haltkop, what do we do? What do we do? Shabbos, don't look inside. How do we finish that bracha? Do we say Mekadesh HaShabbos Yisrael V'Azmanim? Or, even though we say it because it's Shabbos, but we only say Mekadesh HaShabbos? Same type of question. And Rava says, and we paskin like Rava, that we only mention Shabbos. Yom Tishchalias b'Shabbos, Shliach Tzibur, Hayoid Lifnei Atera Arvis. We're speaking not about what we call today the Chazan. No, we're speaking about the repetition of Maidav, the abridged repetition. Paskins Rava Ein Tzorach Lahaskir Shel Yom Tov at all. Indeed, all you do is Mekadesh HaShabbos. And why, says Rava, She'il Molei Shabbos without Shabbos? If not for Shabbos, Ein Shliach Tzibur Yored Arvis B'Yom Tov. This mamish is a contradiction. But let's not even focus on Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is the student. The teacher is Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi is speaking about Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah. Same thing. There's never Ne'ilah on Shabbos. So how can you paskin that by Shabbos Ne'ilah you do say Yom HaManoyach and Yom HaKippurim? You're choisem Mekadesh HaShabbos and Yom Kippur. And why not Friday night Yom Tif? That's a great contradiction. And here the Gemara says, Hachi Hashta, you can't compare one to the other. In English, apples and oranges. Chasam over there, Bedinu dafilu b'Shabbos nami l'tzarech. This is the key. Really, on Shabbos, you should not have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. You know why you don't repeat the Shemona Esrei at night? B'chlal, why don't we repeat the Shemona Esrei at night? If you remember, Masechta Brachas, that was the big machloikas that led to Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah's ascent, so to say, to the head of the academy, whether are you mechuyev to daven maitiv, or is it only at a shus? Is it optional? Now we learned the Tosfos and Shabbos. Now that we took it upon ourselves to daven maitiv, don't think that it's a zoy optional, but still it's not on the level of Shachris and Mincha. And that was the whole sugya we had in Brachas. What's the origin of the Shemona Esrei? We had two major opinions. Either it is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and then what difference will there be? Yaakov is a father of the Jewish people like Yitzchak and like Avram. The other source of the tefillas is because of Makim Karbanos. Karbanos are only brought during the day. Tamid and Tamid. Based on that, Maitiv are not on the same level. So very good. Maitiv is Rishus. Because of that, you're not mechuyev to make a repetition. We make a repetition for a side reason. And we learned this. What's the side reason? Because of the danger. What's the danger, guys? Most of the shuls, or many of the shuls then, were not in the cities. Real estate was expensive, or whatever the logic was, it was outside the city. And you should know that it wasn't that common for people to go to shul at night. People would go to shul during day. When did people go to shul at night? Shabbos. Here the problem is that some people at night, on Shabbos, they come to shul late. And if you would not make some sort of extension after the Shemona Esrei to keep everyone else who came on time in shul longer, then most people would leave. And the latecomers, they wouldn't daven quicker. They would leave later, and they would have to walk home alone, and that's the danger. It's just amazing that when you think about how long is the abridged version of the repetition, not that big. Even with a tremendous chazan, 5 minutes. He'll sing all negunim, 10 minutes. Yeah, sometimes that makes all the difference. That makes all people get into trouble because they couldn't wait a few minutes and they walked along by themselves. No, since there's really no chiyuv, it's only because of sakana. That's different. Aval haki over here. No, you're chayiv to daven ne'ilah. I know you're chayiv because of Yom Kippur. You're not chayiv but it's a chiyuv. So now that you're chayiv, we say Yom Mushan is chayiv arba tefillos. Beautiful difference. And therefore, yes, we paskin like Rabbi Shua ben Levi, and you v'choisem mekadesh haShabbos v'yom HaKippurim. Okay, going back to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Amid Beis, when we are going through all of the wicks and the fuels that are or that are not valid for Neiros Shabbos. We just finished the Chanukah, so we're going back to Shabbos. So the Mishnah wrote towards the end that V'loi ba'aliyah. Aliyah is the tail of a shepsel. It's fat, not with other parts of animal fats. That's the Tanakama. Nachum Hamadai says that if you have fats that were boiled, they already are better. And the Chachamim say no. Echad mavushal ve'echad she'en mavushal eimad likambay. And the question is, doesn't it sound like the Chachamim and the Tanakama are saying the same thing? Like, who needs that? We already said you can't use. There's a machloikas. So why repeat it? Answers the Gemara, no, they're not saying the same thing. Now, what's going to be interesting is that we're going to have a statement here. We're going to have a statement on Daf Chavav Amid Beis, all based on that which we learned. All based on that which we learned. Rav Bruna Amar Rav. Rav Bruna Amar Rav Chever was on Daf Chav Aleph. What was the topic over there? Topic over there was like this. If you have an invalid fuel, listen to the nature of how Hashem made the world. Fuel means fuel that doesn't go into the wick well. If you add only a little bit of good fuel, the good fuel, it's like a good chassid, influences all of the bad fuel. Now, could you use it or not? So why not? Because maybe someone will forget to add the good fuel. So the lenient opinion was that Rav Bruna Amarav, that he does allow to pour a little bit of valid, but he only mentioned shleimeh, not into chaylev, into melted chaylev. This topic, chaylev cannot be used. Melted chaylev, that was like zeta l'gzeda. Melted chaylev, he says you could put a little bit of good fuel. Not everyone agrees with him. So the reason why the Mishnah has the Tanakama and then the Chachamim is because they are arguing whether you are allowed to add a little bit of good fuel in the cooked chaylev. Now the only thing is, okay, who holds what? Who holds what? The Gemara says, "V'loi misaymei." We remember that was the answer. We cannot figure out from reading the words of the Tanakama and reading the words of the Chachamim. We don't know which one sides which with, but they don't have the same opinion. Their argument is again whether you are allowed to add a little bit of good oil, a little bit in the cooked oil. Since there is a machlekes whether or not, so the Mishnah recorded both opinions. In spite of the fact, again, that we don't know which way this goes. Chava will stop over here, God willing, to be continued.